There is a wound that doesn't bleed but hurts more than any physical blow. You feel it when someone speaks to you as if you don't exist. When your words are lost in the air because on the other side there is a silence full of contempt. That wound has a name: disrespect. And if you stay until the end of this video, I will reveal to you why we are ourselves to be disrespected and what unconscious mechanism keeps us tied to people who hurt us, and above all, how to disarm someone who doesn't respect you without doubt, losing your dignity in the attempt. Because there is a huge difference between responding and reacting, between defending yourself and destroying. I will tell you from my experience, from years in the office, seeing real pain in real people. Leave me your comment below if you have ever felt that someone spoke to you as if you were worthless. Subscribe, because what comes next will change the way you see your relationships. Click the bell icon. Share this video with someone you know who needs it. I begin with something that affected me years ago. I remember a patient, I'll call her Martha, who came to my office with her eyes swollen from crying so much. She told me, "Gabriel, my partner yells at me in front of his friends. He treats me like I'm an idiot, but then he apologizes and says he loves me." I asked her, "What do you feel when he yells at you?" She remained silent. Then she answered, "I feel like I'm dying inside, but I can't leave. I'm afraid of being alone." That was it. The fear of loneliness weighed more than her dignity. And that is the cruelest trap of disrespect, which convinces us that we deserve this treatment because deep down we believe we are not enough. Respect is not a courtesy. It is not. It's not something optional that one can give or not according to the mood of the day. Respect is the recognition of the other as a subject, as a complete human being with their history, their pain, their fears, their dreams. When someone disrespects you, they are not only hurting you in the present day, they are denying you. They are telling you, even if I don't use those words, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you feel. And that, believe me, is one of the most profound forms of violence that exists. Freud spoke of narcissism, of how each of us has an image of ourselves that needs to be sustained by the gaze of others, save Allah. When we were children, that gaze was that of our parents. If they looked at us with love, with attention, with recognition, we built a valuable self-image. But if that gaze was cold, indifferent, or downright hostile, something inside us would break. And that's where it all begins. That's where the tragedy of those who, as adults, accept relationships where there is no respect begins, because what we didn't receive as children, we continue to look for in the wrong place. I had a patient, I'll call him Julio, who worked at a company where his boss humiliated him every day, yelled at him, belittled him in front of his coworkers, gave him impossible work, and then blamed him for not that they says in it. Julio came to the office devastated. "Why don't you quit?" I asked him. "Because I need the job," he said. But when we dug deeper, something else came to light. His father had been the same, an authoritarian guy who treated him like he was a nuisance. Anyway, Julio had learned since he was a child that his place in the world was to put up with mistreatment. He had normalized disrespect. For him, that was normal. Do you see how it works? The unconscious repeats itself. What is not processed is repeated. We look outside for what we know inside, even if it destroys us. That's why some people always fall in love with that same type of person. That's why some people return again and again to relationships that hurt them, because the unconscious doesn't distinguish between what is good for you and what is bad for you. It only distinguishes between the known and the unknown. And what is familiar always seems safer, even if it is hell. Now, disarming someone who does not respect you does not mean taking revenge. It does not mean humiliating the other person. It is not about becoming what we hate. Disarming is something else. It's taking away the power we gave them to show them their aggression won't yield the desired outcome. Anyone exhibiting disrespect is aiming for something. Supa, daman estão to make you feel inferior, to feel superior by exploiting your weakness. And when you do not give them that, when you do not react as expected, you disarm them. There is a huge difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, it is impulsive, it is letting yourself get carried away by anger. Responding is conscious, it is thought out, it is choosing what to say and how to say it. When someone disrespects you and you react by yelling, insulting, playing their game, you are giving them exactly what they want, Isha. You are confirming that narrative, but when you respond calmly or firmly, without aggression but without submission, that is when you disarm them. I remember Laura, another patient. Her mother-in-law constantly mistreated her. She made hurtful comments about the way she cooked, dressed, and raised her children. Laura would explode, cry, and fight with her husband because he wouldn't defend her. Until one day, after months of therapy, something changed. Her mother-in-law said to her, "That food looks like dog food." And Laura, instead of exploding, looked at her and said with icy calm, "How interesting your opinion is. I didn't ask for it, but thank you anyway." And she left. The mother-in-law froze. He couldn't decide what to do, as Laura didn't react as he hoped. She didn't back down, but she didn't attack either. She simply set a boundary elegantly. And that's dismantling boundaries. That's the word. Without boundaries, there's no possible respect. And here comes something that's hard to understand. You own your limits. It's not the other person's duty. The other person is going to do what they want to do, what their history, their neurosis, their character allow them to do. It's only you who can decide what you will and will not tolerate. And when you don't set boundaries, you are saying without words, you can treat me like this, because silence also speaks. Silence also sends messages. Setting boundaries is scary. I know. I see it every day. It's scary because we fear the other person's reaction. We are afraid they'll get angry, leave, and abandon us. But losing oneself is far worse than losing another person. Because when you tolerate disrespect over and over again, something inside you starts to die. Your self-esteem erodes like a stone underwater. And there comes a time when you no longer know who you are. You no longer recognize your own voice. Freud said that where the id was a is, the ego must come. What does that mean? That where there is pure instinct, pure reaction, pure impulse, conscience, reflection, and decision must appear. We cannot live reacting automatically to everything that happens to us. We have to be able to think, choose, and position ourselves. And that is what you do when you respond. Instead of reacting, you bring awareness to a situation that wants to lead you to automatism. There is something in the order of enjoyment in abuse. And another great figure in psychoanalysis spoke of enjoyment, that something that goes beyond pleasure. Pleasure is comfortable. It is pleasant. Enjoyment is something else. Enjoyment can be painful, destructive, but there is something addictive about it. There are people who enjoy abusing. And there are people who enjoy being abused, not in the sense that they consciously enjoy it, but in the sense that there is something in that dynamic that is familiar to them that allows them to repeat something from their history. I think of Roberto, a 50-year-old man who came to see me because his wife had left him. I don't understand what happened, he told me. I always did what she wanted. I never contradicted her. I always said yes to everything. Therein lay the problem. Roberto had confused love with his mission. Loving, he believed, meant vanishing, being nothing, no voice. And his wife felt comfortable at first. But over time, she began to despise him. Because it's hard to respect someone who doesn't respect themselves. It's hard to value someone who is willing to give up everything just to avoid conflict. Respect starts with yourself. If you don't respect yourself, if you betray your own values, your own boundaries, your own needs, you can't expect others to respect you. Because you're setting an example of how to treat yourself, you're teaching them that it's okay to walk all over you. And then you're surprised when they do it. Now, there are different types of disrespect. Okay, there is overt disrespect, the type that is evident, that shouts, that insults, that punches, that's easier to identify, although not necessarily easier to let go of. Ooh. There's another type of disrespect that's more subtle, more poisonous, and harder to name. It is the disrespect of someone who makes you feel guilty for needing something, who belittles your feelings, who tells you, you're exaggerating when you express pain, who makes you believe that you're the problem. I had a patient, Cecilia, whose partner would tell him every time he brought up at him, you're very sensitive. Everything offends you. You can't be took to. And Cecilia would end up apologizing. And she would end up at feeling that she was indeed the problem. Until one day in a session I asked her, is it exaggerating to need your partner to listen to you without putting you down? And that's when the veil fell from her face. She realized that she wasn't exaggerating. She realized that her needs were legitimate. That the problem wasn't that she was sensitive, but that he was incapable of empathy. Empathy is the basis of respect. When one can put oneself in the other person's shoes, when one can imagine what the other person feels, it becomes impossible to mistreat them. Abuse requires a certain emotional blindness. It requires not seeing the other person as a subject, but as an object, as something that is there to satisfy my needs, my whims, my need for power. And there is something important here. Not everyone who disrespects you is necessarily a bad person. Sometimes people repeat patterns that they have learned. Sometimes he is unaware of the harm he inflicts. Sometimes they are so engrossed in their own pain that they cannot see yours. That does not justify disrespect, but it explains it. And understanding it can help you not to take it so personally, to not believe the story that you caused it, or that you deserved it, I remember Daniel, a patient who every time his girlfriend got angry, she would stop talking to him for days, punishing him with silence, and he would go into despair. He would beg her, ask her for forgiveness for things he had not even done, just so that she would talk to him again. Until in a session I said to him, "Do you realize that she is manipulating you?" He was shocked. He had never thought in those terms. To him, she was just angry. He didn't see the manipulation. He didn't see that silence was a weapon. He didn't see that they were conditioning him like a dog. Emotional punishment is one of the cruelest forms of disrespect because it leaves no visible marks at. It can't be photographed. It can't be shown. But it destroys you just the same. It makes you feel like you're crazy, that you're the problem, that if only you were different, if only you did things right, every would be perfect. But that's not the case. The problem isn't that you're not up to par. The problem is that the bar is unattainable. The problem is that on the other side, there's someone who needs to control you, to disarm the one who doesn't respect you. So, start by seeing yourself clearly, by recognizing that what's being done to you isn't right, by naming the abuse, by saying, this is violence, this is manipulation, this is disrespect. Because as long as you don't name it, you'll remain trapped in confusion. You keep thinking that maybe it's your fault, that maybe if you tried a little harder, if you were a little better, things would change. Spoiler alert, they're not gonna change, not because you try harder. Things change when the other person decides to change. And the other person will only decide to change if the consequences of staying the same are more uncomfortable than the effort of changing. As long as you tolerate, as long as you endure, as long as you adapt, the other person has no incentive to change. Why bother changing if it works this way? This is where something comes in that in psychoanalysis we call secondary gain. It's a somewhat technical concept, but it's easy to understand. When someone has a symptom, let's say a phobia, that symptom causes them suffering, that's obvious. But it also brings them a hidden benefit. The person who has a phobia of leaving their house suffers from not being able to go out. But at the same time, by staying home, they avoid facing situations that scare them. The symptom serves a purpose. The same thing happens with relationships. The abuser gains power, control, and a sense of superiority. The one who tolerates abuse gains the illusion that by sacrificing themselves, they will gain love or avoid the anguish of loneliness, or repeat a known pattern that, although painful, is for familiar. Do you understand? It's not that we consciously say how great it is that I am being abused. It's that unconsciously there is something that this situation resolves for us. And that's the catch. Because as long as this secondary gain is active, it will be very difficult to get out of this dynamic. That's why it's important to go to therapy. That's why it's important to look within. That's why it's important to ask ourselves, what am I getting out of this relationship? What fear am I avoiding? What am I repeating from my history? Veronica came to see me because her boss was publicly humiliating her, challenging her in front of everyone, making sarcastic comments about her job, and making her feel incompetent. Aka, why don't you leave? I asked him. Because this job gives me financial stability. I'm afraid I won't get another one. We worked on that for months. On the fear, on her self-esteem, on the belief that she didn't deserve anything better. Until one day she quit and did go through a difficult time. But then she got another job where she was treated like a person, where her effort was valued. And he said to me, Gabriel, I can't believe I put up with this much. Now I realize how much I lost because I was afraid. Fear is the great ally of disrespect. The one who disrespects you knows this. That's why they threaten you directly or indirectly. They make you feel that without him or her, you are nothing. That you won't achieve anything better. That no one else will love you. And if you have low self-esteem, if you have been hurt before, those words bite like knives. You believe them. You make the other person's contemptuous gaze your own. Here I want you to think about something. Has someone ever treated you badly, and instead of getting angry, you started to think about what you did wrong? Have you ever blamed yourself for the other person's mistreatment? If the answer is, pay attention, because there is something in you that you need to look at. Something in your history that makes you feel responsible for the behavior of others. There's something that makes you believe that if you are good enough, obedient enough, quiet enough, the other person will do to stop hurting you. But it doesn't work that way. What triggers the abuser's behavior isn't anything you do, but rather something internal to them, is it? It's just the screen on which they project their shit. And understanding that, believe me, is liberating, because it means it's not in your hands to change them, that it is not your responsibility. That you don't have to sacrifice yourself so the other person. Yourself so the other person can be fine, but the person can be fine. There's a phrase I like to say in my office, you can love someone who doesn't exist. What do I mean by this? That when you erase yourself in a relationship, when you give up who you are, what you feel, what you want, the other person isn't loving you. They're loving a fake version of you, a character that you play to please them, and sooner or later that falls apart. And either sooner or later you get tired of acting, and that's when the crisis comes, because the other person gets angry that you're no longer who you were, without realizing that you never were. Oh, you really were like that. I had a patient, Estepian, who was in a stay with a demanding woman. Nothing he did was ever good enough. If he bought her flowers, they were the wrong ones. If he took her out to dinner, it wasn't the restaurant she would have chosen. If he showed up early, he was invasive. If he showed up late, he was inconsiderate. Esteban lived in anguish, trying to figure out what he wanted. Until one day I asked him, do you ever wonder if she is capable of being satisfied? He fell silent. He had never thought about that before. He had always assumed that if she wasn't happy, it was because he hadn't done things right. It had never occurred to him that maybe she was simply insatiable, that maybe there was nothing he could do that would be enough. And here comes another revelation. It is not your job to make anyone happy. You can accompany them, you can love them, you can be present, but you cannot take charge of someone else's happiness. Everyone is responsible for their own emotional life. And when you take charge of something that is not yours, you end up exhausted, empty, resentful. Now, disarming someone who does not respect you requires something fundamental. Taking back your power. Because what happens when someone mistreats you for a long time is that you lose the feeling that you can do something. You become Rani Rasif. You get used to things happening, to the other person deciding, to your voice not counting, and that is what is called learned helplessness. It is a concept from psychology. When a living being is subjected to an aversive situation from which he cannot escape, after a while he stops trying to escape, even when the possibility opens up. He assumes that there is no way out. He gives up. Have you seen when someone is in a horrible relationship and you from the outside tell them, leave it, and they say, I can't? Okay. It's not that you can't. It's that you've learned to feel helpless. It's that your mind has convinced itself that there's no alternativa archive. And breaking that learned helplessness requires taking small steps. It requires starting to say no to small things. It requires starting to set the boundaries on things that seem insignificant. Because every time you set a boundary, even a small one, you're showing your unconscious that you can, that you do have power, that you're not helpless. I remember Paula not daring to tell her boyfriend that she didn't want to watch the movie he had chosen. It's stupid, she told me. It's just a movie. But it wasn't just a movie. It was the umpteenth time that her opinion didn't count. It was the repetition of a pattern in which she always adapted. And I told her, try it next time. Tell him that you'd rather watch something else. And look what happens. He did it. And something incredible happened. He accepted. There was no drama, no fight. And Paula realized that she had been giving in all this time unnecessarily. That her fear was bigger than the real risk. That's key. Many times the fears we have are ghosts. They are projections of our history. They are not the reality of the present. We are afraid that if we set a boundary, the other person will get angry, leave us, punish us. And sometimes it happens, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the other person respects the boundary. And if they don't respect it, if they get angry, if they punish you for setting a basic boundary, then you already have valuable information. That person is not good for you. Because someone who doesn't tolerate you, having boundaries, doesn't love you, they want to dominate you. True love respects boundaries. True love doesn't need you to nullify yourself. True love gives you space to be who you are with your needs, your opinions, your desires. And if someone tells you they love you but doesn't tolerate you being yourself, that's it. There is a contradiction. There is a trap there. There is something that Winnicott, another important psychoanalyst, said about the ability to be alone. He said that in order to truly love, you first have to be able to be alone. You have to be able to tolerate your own company, because if you can't stand being with yourself and loneliness, it terrifies you. You will cling to anyone just to avoid feeling that emptiness sarapuke. And that is where pathological relationships begin. That is where the dynamics of the dependency, submission, and tolerance of abuse begin. I know it is difficult. I know that when you are in a relationship where there is no respect, leaving seems impossible. I know that there are factors, economic, social, the children, what others will say, the fear of starting over. I know I am not minimizing it, but I also know that there is a cost to staying that is sometimes greater than the cost of leaving, and that cost is paid with your mental health, with your self-esteem, with your ability to feel joy, with your dignity. How much is your dignity worth? It is a question that you should ask yourself. How much are you willing to pay to not be alone? How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice? Because there comes a point when the price is too high. There comes a point when you realize that you lost more in the relationship, then you gain that you are left empty, that you no longer recognize yourself in the mirror. Disarming someone who doesn't respect you also means being willing to lose them. And that's terrifying, because if you've been investing years in that relationship, if you've dedicated time, energy, love to it, the idea of all that being lost is devastating. But I need to tell you something. The years that passed have passed. You can't get them back by staying. You just keep wasting more time. It's what in economics they call sunk cost. The mistake of continuing to invest in something that doesn't work just because you invested a lot before. And you do that in relationships all the time. Gonzalo had been married for 15 years to a woman who constantly belittled him. She told him he was a failure, that he was useless, that any other man would have been better the husband. But he stayed. It's been 15 years, he told me. I can't throw all the garbage away. And I asked him, but what is a marriage certificate saving the fantasy that someday it will change? Or are you saving your well-being, your mental health, your right to be treated with respect? It wasn't easy. It took time. But eventually he got the courage to leave. And then he told me, I should have done this years ago. I had no idea how light it feels to be at peace. Peace, that's something when we're caught up in conflictual relationships, we get used to chaos, drama, and fights. And we think that's normal, that's what it is, but there's nothing else. There are relationships where you can be yourself without fear, where you can express what you feel without being destroyed. Where there's disagreement, yes, because that's human, but there's respect, there's listening, there's an intention to understand each other. People often ask me, how do I know if I'm overreacting? How do I know if I'm really being disrespected or if I'm just being too sensitive? And the answer is, trust what you feel. If something hurts you, if something makes you uncomfortable, if something makes you feel bad, that's valuable information. Don't minimize it. Don't convince yourself that it's not that big of a deal. Your body knows. Your emotions know. The thing is, our heads often convince us otherwise. It tells us, don't overreact. No, don't be dramatic. Hold on a little longer. And here comes something that seems central to me. The difference between a conflict and disrespect. In a conflict, two people have different positions. They want different things, but they treat as equals and equals. There is a basic respect. There is a willingness to find a solution where both can be more or less or disrespect, right? In disrespect, one is on top and the other is on the bottom. One is right and the other is wrong. One decides and the other obeys. That is not a relationship. That is a hierarchy of power. And loving relationships should not be like that. There is something along the lines of symmetry that has to exist between two people who love each other. I do not mean that they have to be identical or that they have to contribute the same in all aspects, but that both are subjects, that both have a voice, that both have the right to their feelings, to their needs, to their limits. And when that symmetry is broken, when one has all the power and the other has none, that is where a problem arises. I think of Teresa, who came to therapy because her boyfriend was checking on the cell phone. He asked her for the passwords and for everything, email, social networks, and that on the bank. And if she refused and said, what do you have to hide? If you don't do anything wrong, why don't you give me the passwords? And Teresa felt guilty. She felt that if she had nothing to hide, why not give it to him? But that's manipulation. Because we all have the right to privacy, we all have the right to our own space. And the fact that someone demands total access to your life is not love. It's control. It's a form of disrespect disguised as concern. Disrespect has many faces. There's the one who yells, yes, but there's also the one who controls, the one who manipulates, the one who makes you feel guilty, the one who isolates you from your friends and family, the one who minimizes your achievements, the one who compares you to others to make you feel inferior, the one who uses your privacy against you, the one who punishes you with silence. All of these are forms of disrespect, and they all hurt. Disarming someone who doesn't respect you, it requires that you identify what mechanism that person uses, because everyone has their own style, and once you identify it, you can prepare yourself. You can anticipate. You can decide how you're going to respond, because you will respond. However you respond, the important thing is that it's not automatic. The important thing is that it's a decision, that you choose how to position yourself. There are people who, when you set a limit, double down, get angrier, yell more, threaten, and that's where you back on, where you say, well, I won't say anything else because it'll get worse, Alia. But notice what happens there. The person has learned that getting angrier will make you shut up. So, the next time you set a limit, what will they do? What will they do? They'll get even angrier because they know it works. They know you'll back down. The only way to break that cycle is to stand firm, even if the other person gets worse. And they know that's terrifying because you don't know how far it can go. You don't know if they're going to become violent, if they're going to leave, if it's going to be a scene. But you have to evaluate, is it worth living like this? Is it worth being with someone who respects your limits? Dixie, you're meant to fear it. That's the whole point. When you tolerate the disrespect out of fear, she is not in a loving relationship. She is in a relationship of domination. And that is not love. Love is not scary. Love gives security. Love sustains you. It does not destroy you. Love allows you to grow. It does not force you to shrink. I remember Mariana, who was married to a guy who every time she brought up something that bothered him, he would threaten to leave. If you don't like it, I'll leave, he would tell her. And Mariana would panic. She would beg him. She would back down. She would do whatever it took to keep him. Until one, in therapy, I told her, oh, what if he leaves? What would happen? And she started to cry. I would be alone, she told me. I couldn't stand it. And there we worked on that. Fear of loneliness, on the eye, that being alone was the worst thing that could happen to her. Until she realized that the worst thing that could happen to her was to continue with someone who was holding her emotionally hostage. The day she told him, if you want to leave, go, everything changed. He didn't leave because he didn't really want to leave. He just wanted to keep her under control. And when he saw that the threat no longer worked, he had to change strategy. Some do. Others do leave, and if they do, it's better because they showed that they weren't willing to build something real that wanted. Was power, not love, not love. There's a question I often ask in my office. How would you treat yourself if you were your own best friend? Then most people are left wondering because they realize that they would never tolerate a friend being treated the way they let themselves be treated. That they would never say to a friend the horrible they say to themselves. That they have more compassion for others than for themselves. And that speaks to a lack of self-love, to a deep wound that needs to be healed. Self-love is not selfishness, it's believing yourself superior to others. It's recognizing your own value. It's knowing that you deserve to be treated with respect, that your needs matter, that your brain is legitimate and in. And when you're clear about it, that when that's solid side, it becomes it makes it very difficult for someone to walk all over you. Because you defend yourself, because your own judgment is stronger than the opinion of others. Voila. Claudia came to my office devastated. Her ex had left her for someone else and she felt like a wreck. I'm ugly, I'm boring, I'm useless, she would tell me. And when we started working, it turned out that she was telling herself those things before he left her that she already had an ex-boyfriend, that she wasn't enough, and that's where the danger lies. Yes. Because when you come with that wound, the abuse of the other person comes in easily. It doesn't encounter resistance. It finds fertile ground. So, disarming someone who doesn't respect you is largely about healing yourself. It's closing those old wounds it ties loose. It's stopping believing the lies they told you. It's building a self-image that doesn't depend on the approval of others. And that, believe me, is work. It's therapy. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing what's valuable in you, even if no one else sees it. Freud spoke of the superego, that psychic instance that's like an internal judge. It's the voice of the law of what's right and what's wrong. But sometimes that superego is tyrannical. It's cruel. It demands perfection from us. It punishes us for any mistake, and a lot of people live a superego that destroys them. They treat themselves with a harshness that they wouldn't wish on their worst enemy, and then tolerate others while treating them badly because deep down they believe they deserve it. You have to make peace with yourself. You have to treat yourself with the same kindness that you would treat someone you love. And that's not easy when you come from a history of abandonment, abuse, neglect, because that inner voice that tells you that you are useless, that you don't deserve it, that you are not enough, is the voice of those who hurt you, is the voice of your mother who criticized you, is the voice of your father who never acknowledged you, is the voice of those boyfriends or girlfriends who made you feel worthless. But that voice is not the truth. It's an interpretation. It's a construction. And you can question it, you can dismantle it, little by little. Every time you find yourself thinking something horrible about yourself, stop up. Ask yourself where this is coming from. Who told me this first? Is it really true? Or it's a belief that I inherited and then I dealt with it. Not with cheap optimism, but with facts, with real evidence that that voice is wrong. I had a patient, Federico, who every time he made a mistake, he would say to himself, I'm useless. And we worked on that, on identifying when that voice appeared, on tracking where it came from. It turned out that his father told him that constantly, that he had internal criticism as the absolute truth. And I proposed an exercise for him. Every time that voice appeared, he had to stop and say to himself, I made a mistake. That doesn't make me useless. Mistakes are human. I can learn from this. At first, it was difficult. For him, he felt ridiculous. But over time, that new voice grew stronger and the old voice weakened. Changing your relationship with yourself is essential for changing your relationship with others. Because if you respect yourself, if you value yourself, if you treat yourself well, it becomes much harder for you to tolerate someone treating you badly. It's like having a more sensitive abuse detector. Something you used to tolerate is now unacceptable to you. And that's okay. That's growth. That's evolution. Now, when we talk about disarming someone who doesn't respect you, we also have to talk about the consequences. Because setting boundaries has a cost. Sometimes that cost is being alone. Sometimes it's losing your family. Sometimes it's losing your financial stability. Sometimes it's facing social disapproval, and all that hurts. All that's scary, but you have to think about the long mitao. What do you prefer? A painful present that leads to a better future? Or a bearable present that leads to a future of more pain? Because staying in a relationship without respect is not going to lead you anywhere good. It's going to lead to depression, anxiety, illness. It's going to cause you lose your spark, your joy, your ability to love. I know it's hard. I know that when you're in it, you don't see it clearly. That's why it's important to seek help, to talk to someone, to a therapist, to a friend, to someone who can give you an alternate perspective, because when you're immersed in a situation, you lose objectivity, you get used to it, you normalize the abnormal. There's something that happens a lot in violent relationships. The victim minimizes the abuse. They say it wasn't that bad. They say he didn't do it on purpose. They say it's my fault too. And that's part of the mechanism of violence. It's like a frog that you boil little by little. If you throw it in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in cold water and heat it up little by little, it stays there until it dies. Abuse often starts small, a sarcastic comment, a look of contempt, you're exaggerating. You're exaggerating when you bring up something and you let it go, thinking it is not that bad. But then another comment comes along and another, and each time they become more frequent, more hurtful, more destructive. And before you want to realize it, you're caught up in a dynamic that you don't know how to get out of. That's why it's important not to ignore warning signs, not to minimize, not to justify. If something makes you feel bad, if something seems wrong to you, trust your intuition. Don't wait until things get worse to react, because when things get worse, it's harder to get out. Ugh. Leonardo came to see me after his girlfriend hit him. Yes, he, because violence has no gender, and he felt ashamed He felt that as a man, he could not say that a woman hit him, that they would laugh at him, that they wouldn't believe him, and shame kept him trapped. We worked a lot on that, on the idea that everyone, absolutely everyone, men and women, has the right to be respected, that no one deserves to be hit, that no matter the gender, abuse is abuse. Disarming those who don't respect you also means challenging social mandates. It means encouraging yourself to say what's happening to you, even if it's not what's expected of you. It's breaking with the image that you have to put up with everything, that you have to be strong, that asking for help is weakness, because asking for help is not weakness, it is intelligence, it is courage. It is recognizing that you can't do it alone and that it is okay not to be able to. No one is born knowing how to set boundaries. No one is born knowing how to defend themselves. That is something you learn. If you didn't learn it as a child, you have to learn it as an adult. And that requires humility. It requires being willing to make mistakes. It requires trying, failing, trying again, until you find your way, until you will find your voice. In my office, I see people who manage to change their lives after years of therapy, people who leave destructive relationships, people who dare to set boundaries, people who regain their self-esteem. And it is beautiful because it shows that change is possible, that we are not condemned to always repeating the same thing, that we can learn, that we can grow. But I also see people who do not dare. People who know that it is wrong, who understand everything I tell them, but who cannot take this given step. And I understand that too, because godless change is scary, leaving what is familiar. And there are people who prefer a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. I don't judge. Everyone has their own time, their own story, and you can't force anyone to change. Change has to come from within. There has to be a moment when you say, enough is enough. I can't take it anymore. I don't care what happens, but this can't go on like this. And that moment is different for everyone. Some get there after a very hard episode, a blow, a betrayal, a public humiliation, something that breaks the precarious balance in which they had been living. Others get there little by little, go accumulating anger, pain, frustrations, until one day something small overwhelms them. And that's when they say, enough. Patricia was in a marriage for 20 years where